Welcome to this demo of the segment opportunity chart on intelligentVIEW. In this video, we're going to discuss a new feature, the segment opportunity chart, which was designed to help identify opportunity through the most relevant intelligent segments to consider in target markets when trying to analyze audiences. This chart acts like a summary of the intelligent segments page in profile reports. To launch it, first create a postal code file either through manual upload or through one of our mapping and audience building tools, and then run a profile report on that target file. This is the file we've taken for analysis, sample grocery store customer file, and we're using CMA Toronto as the benchmark in this example. The file penetration stats of intelligent segments are based primarily on the target file, which is then indexed against the benchmark. So, why is the segment opportunity chart a big deal? Traditionally, identifying the correct segments to use from the intelligent segments table isn't simple, since identifying opportunity usually requires a combination of target file penetration, benchmark file penetration, and index, which gives us an indicator of which segments are the best ones to target to find lookalikes of your top performing customers. You can't get all of this information easily at a glance, since you can only sort the segments using one of these levers at a time. The segment opportunity chart, however, takes care of that issue by plotting all these elements on a graph, which allows you to quickly and easily identify the top performing segments. Let's start with a quick look at the main levers on this chart. The y-axis is the target file penetration in the segment. So, this means that the vertical location of a bubble indicates a relative penetration of households in a segment within the target file. For example, this segment D4 has a fairly high penetration of 8.43%, which means that 8.43% of the households in the file being analyzed, which were sample grocery store customers, belong to segment D4. The x-axis is the index of the file penetration against the benchmark penetration around a base value of 100. So, the horizontal location of a bubble indicates the relative index of the segment against the benchmark. Index is a rough indicator of how much more likely you are to find this segment in your target audience than you would randomly in the market. So, a high index on a segment indicates that the benchmark is more likely to mimic the target file's behavior and perform well given the same marketing efforts. The size of the bubble itself indicates the relative size of the segment in the target market in terms of number of addressable households and devices. For example, segment D4 has 169,000 households. F2 contains a similar number, whereas a smaller bubble on the chart, I2, contains only about 67,000 households. This means that a larger bubble represents a bigger opportunity in the target market. Now, the chart itself is divided into four quadrants based on index and target file penetration. The top right quadrant indicates high index and high penetration. The top left indicates low index high penetration. Bottom left is low index low penetration. And bottom right is high index low penetration. You also have the ability to select all the segments in a quadrant by clicking on this button. Let's take a look at what these quadrants mean with a simple use case. Assume that the sample file under analysis is a list of postal codes of a grocery chain's most frequent customers. They're trying to acquire new regular customers in the Toronto market but have a limited budget and need to prioritize who they should be marketing to as well as how they should be trying to reach these customers. We can identify a few segments in the top right quadrant which make up a pretty significant chunk of the target file and have a high index and penetration. They are namely D4 and F2. I can select these two segments from here, and what this means is that the grocery chain and their current marketing efforts are working really well for customers in these segments, and they can market their existing promotions to postal codes containing these segments in the CMA Toronto market. I can click on them and see the addressable audience statistics, and I can send these audiences straight away for digital media activation to the intelligentVIEW platform. Or I can run a carrier walk containing just these segments and perform a direct mail campaign. But let's stop and take a look at the other quadrants first. The top left quadrant contains a large segment in the target market, in this case segment G1. While G1 is a pretty significant chunk of the grocery chain's customers considering the large file penetration percent, there is a lot being left on the table since it is one of the largest segments in the CMA Toronto market. So, if the chain wants to identify and attract customers from the segment, they need to study it to identify what brings the most value to customers in the segment and change their marketing mix to accommodate them if acquiring customers in this segment is important. For example, since the segment contains a large percentage of visible minorities, promotions on more ethnic food items might be able to attract customers in this segment. The bottom left quadrant has low file penetration and index, but it actually contains the single largest segment in the Toronto market, segment G2, as well as a collection of some smaller segments that make up a chunk of the CMA Toronto market. If the grocery chain wants to attract customers from segment G2, they would need to identify how to best attract customers in the segment and analyze if it's even worth the effort considering there are other large segments in the other quadrants that might be easier to attract and retain. The bottom right quadrant contains a number of smaller segments. These are segments where the file penetration is low but the index is high. This makes sense considering the relative small size of these segments in the target market. So, while these segments may be over-indexed, they have a pretty small relative market size, and any efforts made towards acquiring customers in these segments would likely lead to minimal incremental gains. So, now that we've identified what the top performing segments are, I can send them to intelligentVIEW for activation. Let's give the audience a representative name. So in this example, let's make it something easy to remember. CMA Toronto grocery customers, high penetration segments. And I can either activate them through digital media in the extracted audiences screen, or I can run a carrier walk. You can see now that they show up in intelligentVIEW, and I can submit them to a DSP for digital media activation. This is a small example of how these segments and quadrants are used in practice. The significance of these quadrants changes drastically depending on the context of the file being analyzed. For example, the meaning of the quadrants gets drastically shifted if the file being analyzed is of prospective customers. If you have any questions about how to use this chart for your particular use case, contact your CIG account manager today.